Hi, welcome to this week's episode of TV. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of WeTV. What would you do if you suddenly got $10,000? That's what we're going to talk about today. Enjoy.
Do it again.
All right. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of WeTV. The question that we're going to be talking about today is, what would you do if you suddenly got $10,000? Look forward to it. No, got that wrong. Welcome to this week's episode of WeTV. The question that we're going to be talking about today is, what would you do if you suddenly got $10,000? Hope you enjoy.
So you've thrown down an interesting question for the week, Finn. And I want to ask the question back to you. Is it as simple as making a call on $10,000?
I actually threw this question down because I hate the question. Because we get it so often. People are going, well, I've got $20,000, what should I do with it? And without any other information, it's a pretty useless question.
Okay, so if I'm coming to you and I've got 10 grand, what else do you want to know about me?
I want to know your current financial situation, what goals you have in place, what are things that are really important to you, what do you value, have you got like insurances in place. There's so many different attributes. You can't just pick one particular area.
Okay, so let's say you want to know about my financial position. What do you need to know?
I need to know, what are you currently earning? What are you currently spending? What assets do you have and what liabilities, what debt you may have? And then really know also what is your propensity to actually save and invest as well.
Okay.
And finally, what level of risk are you willing to take?
Why will that make a difference?
Because that ultimately determines where that money goes. If you've got a property and you're trying to focus on paying it off, then the best thing it may be to put that $10,000 there. If you have no cash reserves, the best thing may be to put the $10,000 there. If you haven't had a holiday or anything for a long time and you suddenly got this because of a windfall or a really good work that you did, maybe the best thing to do would be to spend that $10,000 on a holiday.
Okay, so there's a spectrum here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the things that people often come up with and get distracted with?
They get distracted with what's the best investment right now, and the best investment may be no investment at all. Like we said, it may just be parking it, sitting there and doing nothing. Or maybe actually to spend that money on themselves. The best investment may be on their own health. Or they get distracted on the other side of the way and they start thinking how they can spend it straight away, and they don't realise that this is still their money. So the biggest area we see this with tax returns and bonuses. They're like, ooh, free money. And I'm like, it's not free money. It's been your money the whole time. We can still allocate this towards goals.
Oh, tax returns. You are so right. And people do forget that that is money that you have been having withheld from your salary or your wage each week, each fortnight, each month throughout the course of the year. And it's actually the government saying, oh, you've paid a little bit too much.
Yeah, they've actually been taking money off you. So they're paying back the money. They've effectively been borrowing and they're paying it back.
An interesting trick I like to use is, if you had have been just smoothing that out through the course of the year, what would you have done with that money? So instead of getting $10,000, you were getting $833 a month.
Yeah.
Would you treat it any differently?
You generally would. You'd be like, oh, it's not such a big windfall. I might just allocate it towards some of my investment goals, or I might increase my personal spending by a little bit. But suddenly when we get that $10,000, it's like our dollar signs go up and it's like free money, and we start being a bit silly with it.
So when do you think, what are some scenarios where it is okay to spend it? So we're not saving, we're not clearing debt, we're not investing.
So I think it's when you've been clear with a goal for quite a while, and this would just reach that goal straight away. It might be you've been wanting to go on a holiday, or you might have been wanting to upgrade a new car, or potentially it may be an education thing. We see a lot of our generation wanting to spend more money on education, and it's hard sometimes to think about how do I do that. But you've earned an extra $10,000, why not do it then?
Okay, that's a really interesting interesting concept. I see this unfortunately come up often with people with inheritances, which I do believe should be treated differently to a tax return. It's not the same as a tax return, it's not the same as a bonus. And people to think, okay, is there some things in the short term that I could do? And as often is do and not have, I could do and I could get something really valuable out of this.
And it could be an experience like, if often inheritance, it may be like if this was really important to your grandma, like she was from Russia and she always wanted you to go to Russia with her and you never did. It may be the time to go and do a trip and actually meet her family or just be where she was actually brought up. That could be a really nice way to honour the journey she went on. Or it could be something, a philanthropic activity. You could be donating it to a charity. That's when I think it starts getting a little bit different and it's not just about the numbers.
And I also think stopping using the word spending in that regards, because it's investing in an experience or a memory, it's achieving a goal, as you mentioned before, if you're really close and this could tip you over the edge. But I almost feel like the word spending has a little bit of a dirty sound to it.
Yeah, I do. And sometimes we have two types of personalities of people who come in. There's the one where we have to go, okay, you're like allocating funds a little bit too much, funds that you may not actually have. And then there's other people on the other spectrum who are like, they're just scrimping away and saving for, I don't know, for the future and never actually enjoying their life as well. And we have to educate them on it's okay to spend money on things you value, because ultimately that's all money is about, isn't it? It's a transactional value. We do something of value for someone else, we get rewarded with money, then we can use that on things that we value. And the concept of saving, investing, it's still to be used one day. I think we're seeing that with some of the older generations where they're very focused on like leaving money to the next generation or just dying with money. What's the point of it? Like we should actually be using it as well.
We're not Tutankhamun over here. Like
yeah,
we're not going to get buried with all our wealth.
Yeah.
So, do you believe in spreading the love, or do you think $10,000 is a small amount or sufficient that it's okay to just shoot out one thing?
So once again, it really depends on who you are. Like $10,000 for some people is huge. I think it was scary. We were talking about a stat the other day that it's something like 75% of people don't have $1,000 available to actually have an unexpected expense. So it's to that person, that $10,000 is going to be really, really big. Unfortunately, often those people are the ones who just go spend it straight away because they haven't learned the value of saving and investing and actually using those funds for another day. There's some cultures who are very renowned for that. They don't save, they don't invest, and they will just spend. If they get $2,000 or $500,000, it will just disappear. Knowing where you're at is important, and I think this is where the power of like getting really in touch with what you value and where your goals are. Then you can look at, well, I have these different goals, where am I going to get the greatest return? One time it might be just allocate it all in one area, or it might be to spread it between the goals.
So where would you start if someone has just gotten a windfall in some way, shape or form? Do we start with actually going, where has the money come from? Because that might actually change the way that we tackle it.
I think it's good to have that understanding, but still, if you are someone who you have no financial reserves at all and you've inherited $10,000, I feel like you have a duty to look after yourself and at least allocate some of that to a cash reserve, because the difference between a lot of people who have suddenly gone into welfare or into a bad situation where it's this cycle of dependence can just be $1,000. It might be that unexpected expense. We see that a lot in America where they get some form of criminal conviction or debt, and then they have to borrow to get on that debt, and then they can't repay that, and it just starts this cycle. And it can be just $5,000 in a bank account could stop all of that. So if you're not in a good position, like minimum like $5,000 into a cash reserve just to give you a buffer for those emergencies and those situations, then you may be able to enjoy some of it.
So you mentioned before around insurances. Why should people care about that?
Well, we are our greatest asset, and we have the ability to produce money for a long time. And I often, when I talk about insurances, I think if you had you owned an ATM and it was spitting out a guarantee of whether it's $50,000 or $100,000 every year. Now you had an opportunity to insure it with insurance. You had to pay, say it was spitting out $50,000 every year, and you had to pay $1,000 every year to guarantee that if something happened, someone stole your ATM, it would still produce 75% of that. So let's say $35,000 of income every year. Would you do that? $1,000 to have guaranteed $35,000 at least every year.
Well, yes, I would.
Yeah, so when most people see that, they would. We are that ATM, like we are that cash producing machine, and there's risk that one day we may not be able to produce it because we've got sick, we've been injured, unfortunately we may have passed away. So there's insurances out there which actually protect us to ensure that we can at least get 75% of our income at least, or a lump sum if we've got a cancer or a critical illness, to make sure that our goals are still being met.
Okay, so you and I are both reasonably we're down the road of get rich slow, and let's say we do have our basics taken care of. What would you do with 10 grand?
So it's quite interesting.
Let's say this is 10 grand, like no one's died.
Yeah.
It's not a tax return. It is, hey Finn, I think something's under your foot. It's a pile of money.
Mm-hmm.
You found it on the street. What do we do?
So for me, I've got two parts. I've actually just recently kicked in a little bit into we call it the get out of jail account, our Gooch. So I'll be topping that back up with $5,000, and then I'd be booking a heli trip. So I didn't have a heli trip last year, and I haven't got one booked this year, and heli skiing for me is like, that's why I work, that's why I enjoy, so I'd be allocating that straight away to that.
Tell us more about, like, why wouldn't you invest it so that in 10 years time you can have 10 heli trips?
Because I've already got that in the works. Like, I've got investments automatically happening each month. I've got that covered, so I feel confident there.
Okay. What if somebody...
What about yourself?
Oh, I was just trying to think. I'm going to have to come up with this one myself. My get out of jail, I'm pretty comfortable with it. There are two... I'm comfortable with my comfortable standard of living at the moment. And so for me, it would go... Again, I would actually go split in half. I'm going to own about thirds, but I'm going to stick with splitting it in half. I'm comfortable with how much I'm investing on a monthly basis, so mine would both be cash related. One would be going into my dream holiday house, and the other is towards actually going to get a 4-wheel drive.
Really?
Yes. And
not the little Swift.
No, the Swift's going to go, and like whether we buy a lease, whatever it is, that's TBC. But at the end of the day, the 4-wheel drive costs money in some capacity, and putting towards, we have got a little car account set up for that, and that's to give a sort of a bit of a lifestyle shift in terms of being able to go forward driving, go up to the snow, be able to do those sort of mountain treks a little bit more easily. So that is like my guilt-free place that I would put the money, because I'm confident with the other elements.
And how nice is that statement, guilt-free? So I'll challenge a lot of other people when they answer this. Is this going to be a guilt-free spend? And if it's not, then it might not be the right allocation. So for me, if I had just gone and spent $10,000 on a heli skiing trip, I might feel a little bit guilty, because I'm like, come on, like, that's not going to be good for me. So I had this great heli skiing trip, but I come back with that financial hangover again.
I had an opportunity.
Yeah. But with splitting it, I'm being financially responsible. So it's empowering to actually know where your money is already going and what will be the greatest value for you.
So let's talk about people who are very investment minded. So let's say people have had a look and they go, my get out of jail, it's nice and juicy. I'm insured in case shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
I am comfortable with my day-to-day progress towards some of my comfortable standard of living goals, but I'd like to do something investment-minded that I wouldn't have otherwise done.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I'm prepared to take a bit more risk on. It's an opportunity. What are some of the options that could be available to them? Let's go to spread.
Well, I'm actually going to bring it back a little bit before we get into that, because you've been introducing some language which is very comfortable for us, but I don't know if our audience will know that. So you keep mentioning basics, comfortable, and you haven't mentioned aspirational yet, but that's what you're pretty much asking, this standards of living. What are you talking about there?
So our basic standard of living is, if you think about it like the healthy eating pyramid, this is our fruit and veggies, dairy, meat, if that's your vibe. It's the stuff that we need to eat really to function. We need water. That forms the bottom of the pyramid. When we have our basic standard of living, whether it's roof over our head, money to eat, water, basic healthcare, that's what we need to live on a day-to-day basis. Not a particularly fulfilling life, but a functional one.
Mm-hmm.
Once we have our basic standard of living taken care of, we can start thinking about things that are a little bit more comfortable. And ideally for millennials, this is maintaining our current standard of living. So it's things like education, adventure,
Holidays.
relationships, family. There's nothing too crazy in there, but it's very similar to what we have right now. But ultimately, at the top...
sometimes people are living a little bit above their comfortable lifestyle as well. So it's almost got to make sure it keeps sustaining, and they've got a little bit of work to do.
Absolutely. And again, if we're talking about food, like that's your carbs. Maybe there's a little bit of dairy coming into the mix there. Lots of protein sources. But ultimately, we have the top of the pyramid, which is our aspirational standard of living. And these are the things that we would love to achieve. They are the metaphoric icing on the cake. And ultimately, if we achieve them, it would be wonderful. But I like to think that if we died in a comfortable standard of living, we'd still die very happy people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those things to really strive for, and can add a bit of spice. And they're the ones that we enjoy the journey of seeking as much as the achievement themselves.
So we introduced this a couple of years ago. Why did we do that, and how has it actually helped your members live a more sort of whole life?
Well, we often come back to decision-making frameworks and how we can use models like this to help us make decisions, even our values. Like that's a system that allows us to make decisions and becomes our North Star, our guiding beacon. And understanding what our basic, comfortable and aspirational goals are or lifestyles are can help us make a lot of these decisions. Like, what the hell would we do with $10,000? Because if we don't have our basics taken care of, forget all the other stuff.
That's the important bit, isn't it? So a lot of the time we love to think about the aspirational side of things, but it's like the house of cards. If you don't have the basic and the comfortable met, you can get the aspirational and it can just completely blow up.
And likewise, if you are confident with your basic standard of living, then play in the comfortable space and feel awesome about it.
And that's where this question led into. If you've got your comfortable sorted, you can now start taking risks and not be worried. You can go, you know what, I'm going to try to start that new business, or I'm going to take that education course, or I'm going to invest in something risky like cryptocurrency or something, because you actually can. And just for everyone, we have an investor psychology and philosophy document written by myself. It's based on this and Maslow's hierarchy of needs on our website, so please feel free to download that.
We'll add it in the show notes below. But using this framework and understanding where do I sit at the moment, where am I perhaps not on track for? I'm not currently on track to buy a boat.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be an area that I'm prepared to take on a bit of risk for.
So I will answer your question now. So it was a long-winded circle. I wasn't deflecting. I was just wanting to make sure we had clarity around there. So some of the great investment opportunities which may be suitable for that more aspirational side of things, it could be investing in yourself, going and taking that course which enables you to potentially earn some income by a side hustle or get a promotion. That's one way. It could be investing in some more high risk share investments that maybe some of your friends have been working in the companies and know a little bit about it, or you may be exposed through some of your work. Could be investing in startup businesses. A great way. It could be starting your own business, that dream that you've been having for a long time. One of the greatest things about the modern day world is you can start a business with a few $1,000s. So that $10,000 may actually be the startup capital that you need.
And I think there's a couple of other things I would add onto that, which is, we've spoken before about leverage, and you could actually use debt to make that $10,000 $20,000.
Yep.
Or 15, or 30, depending on what investments you're looking to buy into. Would you leverage?
Yeah, I do. I think, well, I know, like a bit of leverage is really good. For our generation, like the optimal leverage is about 30%. At anything less, you're actually being a little bit inefficient with money.
Leaving money on the table.
Yeah, you're leaving money on the table, but anymore, you're now taking risks which could jeopardize your life. So we like to see leverage for our member situation. It's not for everyone. People still choose not to, but if we're doing optimizations, about that 30% leverage is really good.
So what are the uses of $10,000 or tax returns or bonuses that just have you pulling your hair out a little bit?
I get frustrated all the time with things like this. Just a really expensive holiday, a new car, but not even really that much difference. Like it's the excuse to go get the new car, which actually costs a lot more than $10,000 because of transactions. Probably one of the biggest things is just like not doing anything. Like actually not being aware of what to do with that $10,000, and they just sit on it. And there's a difference between sitting on it and allocating it to your get out of jail account. Like your get out of jail account is an actual intentional activity, but just sitting there and not doing anything, that's just a bit silly.
For me, I see this quite a bit, and I have also been guilty of this myself in the past because it's very easy to do, is it becomes clean-up money. And so all those things that perhaps you've been procrastinating on through the course of the year, you need to get some new curtains, this is broken down, you've been meaning to go do this or do that, and it just becomes stuff or absorbed.
It's that lost money, isn't it?
It is, and I get that those things need to be done, but I think we do sometimes, particularly with things like tax money that might be coming around relatively frequently, or a bonus, we fall into the trap of deferring these things, which we could have otherwise incorporated into our finance intentionally, but we defer, and then we're like, it's just cleaning up. I'll just clean up with my tax money.
And it's for people who don't have that much money. Having $10,000 suddenly in an investment portfolio is very empowering, and it can be motivational for you, and you can actually start investing more. So do something good with it.
Give it away?
I wouldn't give it all away. Like if you're in a place where you're in a place where you can always give your money away, completely fine. But otherwise, I think that's an irresponsible activity again, because you haven't looked after your own needs, and once you've looked after your own needs, you can actually help people more in the future as well. Maybe give a portion away if that's important to you, but not all.
So, tips and tricks. So you said you want people who watch this season of WeTV to know exactly what they're going to do. So what are they doing first?
So I would love everyone to go do this exercise themselves and go, where would they spend $10,000 if they suddenly got it? And if they can't answer it quickly, then they need to do work. They need to work out where their money's currently going, work out what are some little mini goals that are important to them, and then actually think about allocating that money, and then go and do it. Like, I'm sure there's probably some way you can earn $10,000 and somehow, whether it's like set a goal and you're like, all right, I know I'm going to get my tax return in a few months' time. Allocate that money now. And so you have that plan, so you're actually set up for it.
I've been trying this, again, both myself and with several of my members, like months out, so that it doesn't feel like a windfall and it just becomes part of your strategy. It becomes part of the plan and you get excited because it's progress on a goal opposed to a splurge.
Spot on. So for your members, or actually for you, the way you provide advice to your members, what are some of the people who sometimes interfere with your plan?
Parents,
Yeah?
partners, colleagues,
Friends? And why is that?
I fundamentally believe it comes from a good place, but most of the time these people don't actually have context on your financial position and quite possibly your goals. And so what they're actually doing is sharing their opinions or their experiences that may or may not be appropriate for you. And this goes all the way down to some of the stories that I tell about myself and my members may or may not be appropriate for the situation that you're in, or people who are watching this are in. And if those tips and tricks and ideas come from a place that may not be as enlightened as some of our members are in terms of their financial well-being, it can actually be harmful.
It can be, and sometimes they're projecting their own views or experiences on them as well, and it may have no relevance to you at all. So when you get a windfall of $10,000, don't go asking your friends or parents what to do. Seek out the people who actually know you quite well.
And how sad would you be if that 10,000 became 9,500 because suddenly you were buying drinks? And then you're like, oh, actually $10,000 would have been a perfect amount for me to achieve this goal.
Shit, we didn't touch on that at all.
No, I've just kind of dropped down a little bit.
That's something we need to talk about a little bit more. So
talk about it.
We get these windfall and we share it with people, and suddenly it's your shout tonight. It's your you've got the money. You can pay for these things.
What are the stats on people who win the lottery and then go broke?
2 years. The stats are that I can't remember the highest amount, but on average they go broke after 2 years, and it's because all these people come out of the woodworks and they're not caring about you. They're caring about themselves, and they think the money's unlimited, and we see that with sports players and stuff as well. So keep it to yourself and seek out your actual advisors.
So for you, you've said you're going to go heli skiing and put some money in and get out of jail. What about if it was 100,000?
Ooh, so if it's 100,000, I'd be allocating about probably $50,000 straight away to my long-term financial freedom number. So it just does a big whack on there, because it's not often you get $100,000 coming in, so it'd just be nice to make that happen. I would still be allocating $5,000 to my heli skiing, $5,000 to my get out of jail account, so that'd leave about $40,000. I then believe, what else have I got going on at the moment, goals wise? I would allocate $20,000 to have this dream of one time having a little cabin in the woods in a mountain, so that would be a really nice experience where I can remember that. And then I'd probably be allocating $20,000 to business investment somehow, because that would be my aspirational, seeing it as somewhere I can really use it.
Something high risk but could give you a very high return in that.
What about yourself?
I think I'd double my original plan, which was sort of 10,000 goes to the four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
10,000 goes into the house in the bush. I think I do start thinking a lot more long term on this, and I'd probably top up my super just to give it a bit of a front load. So for this financial year, it means that I could be putting probably an extra 5 or 10 grand into that.
So what's the benefit of doing that as well? I like to educate as much as possible.
So the rationale for that is if there are periods of time when I'm not putting money into super, whether it's because I'm not working or because I just choose not to, being self-employed, I can choose to do so, it means I'm essentially prepaying my super.
Yeah.
I'm just getting on the front foot, and then it's going to compound over time. So.
And if you're not maximising your concessional contributions, which are those pre-tax contributions, you could actually use that money to do that as well, which means you're getting about a 30% return instantly as well.
Absolutely. I do have a share portfolio that is leveraged and is linked to some of my medium-term goals, which I think would be quite useful. My bonds are taken care of. I actually think I would invest a good 10 grand into my own business and some of the initiatives that I've been wanting to do, but you have to balance the resources. I would travel. I would give the adventures account would get a little boost earning. But I'd actually would do some things with my family, and I think that's enough money for me in terms of $100,000. I'm comfortable with spending. My parents go on a trip. It's been a while since they've left the country, or perhaps something for my nephews. So I think when you're talking about that quantum, and again, once you've got some of those basics and comfortable, we can think a little bit more broadly and a little bit more creatively.
So let's have some fun. We've already seen this. Some of our members have inherited $1 million. Where does $1 million go?
I'll admit, sometimes I see those ads for Taps Lotto on the TV right when I'm trying to go to sleep, like $20 million jackpot, and then I can't sleep that night because I've been thinking really, really practically about how I'm gonna do this. For me, that's the sort of money that I could achieve that big picture goal in terms of that house in the country. But I actually wouldn't buy it outright. Like, I believe in leverage, and I think that kind of money you can leverage very, very well. So I actually think I would buy 1 or 2 properties with some leverage, or if you go heavily into my share portfolio and leverage that. Because it's funny, I think I'm less inclined to do that at the lower levels, but the idea of turning 1 million into 2 million over time and then going, this could set you up.
Yeah, it's funny.
I actually get more and more sensible and
I'm the exact same.
The bigger the number gets.
I just instantly thought my long-term goal of financial freedom, I'm just allocating there. I've had it before and I've lost it, and I'll just be like, great. That
take the 10,000. We were happy with the $10,000 at the start.
Yeah.
The other 990 goes.
Put it there, and then I know that my cash flow in the future, I can be allocating more to the things like heli skiing and stuff in the future, which I think wouldn't be the norm for the everyday consumer. I think it's because we are now educated and we know what's important to us, and we have that ability to make decisions. We would think a little bit differently in that regard.
I reckon a lot of people would buy a house outright.
Yeah, I do too. And I don't believe it would be the greatest thing, because once again, that's your only asset, and you've now got used to living in that house, and you've got accustomed to it, and you don't have any other resources. So you might be asset rich, but you're really cash poor.
So fun exercise for people to do. So we go 10 grand, 100,
and 1 million.
So you've heard what we're going to do with this money, and the challenge has been laid down for you to think about it for yourself. The next step, go make that money happen.
Have some fun, but also be practical, because it may happen to you before you even know it. Both are white whales.
Ken, do you want to do some smoothing? What are you going to say?
Well, you're about to hear.
You stuck the landing and then you just jump off the stage.
Yeah, that's what I do sometimes.